let's go ahead and talk about the biggest news so far in the NBA before the season has even started. Karl-Anthony Towns was traded completely out of left field. Like, no one expected this trade to come in, especially since the Timberwolves ended up making it all the way to the NBA Western Conference Finals with Karl-Anthony Towns as their power forward slash center. It was a very surprising move that nobody really expected to see. And a little bit more surprising on the Knicks side is exactly who they ended up giving up in this exchange. So the Knicks, the two valuable players that the Knicks ended up giving up in exchange for Karl-Anthony Towns were Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo. Now, Donte DiVincenzo was part of the same Villanova team that Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart have all been a part of. And seeing that we haven't even seen the Villanova Knicks, which was so hyped in the offseason, this came as a very surprising move from the Timberwolves and from the Knicks as well. They also ended up dealing a lot of other. They ended up dealing a first-round pick as well in exchange for Towns. So it was Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick in exchange for the Minnesota power forward Karl-Anthony Towns. And again, this is completely out of left field, but I do feel like the reason why this trade was put into place was to try and construct a roster that can match up rather well to the Boston Celtics and their roster, because having another guard like Donte DiVincenzo would affect their rotations, and as opposed to having a center, because now they actually have the Knicks, now that they have a center. It was a bit of a problem going into this season, and it was a little bit of a discussion on what they would do at the center position. But as of right now, I mean, it seems like now they have their center situation sort of in check. And rumors have it that this isn't going to be the only deal that the Knicks do before the season started. There's also some rumors saying that there's a possibility that the Knicks could end up trying to make a deal with, but the reports are saying, the Ayton as a possible center that they could use in their rotation as well. And that's going to be pretty interesting. But as of right now, the Knicks starting lineup would most likely be Jalen Brunson, along with Josh Hart, along with Mikal Bridges, as well as OG Anunoby at the power forward, and then Karl-Anthony Towns at center. And that matchup really fits really well with the matchup against the Boston Celtics, because OG, being the team's the best defender, is going to be on Jason Tatum, and then Mikal Bridges, who is a pretty decent, actually not even a decent, a very solid defender, and as well as a very solid scorer, is going to be on Jaylen Brown, who's the second best player on the team. And that's really, like, the matchups, they work pretty well both ways, both for the Celtics and for the Knicks. It's really going to come down to which team is going to be the better team on the floor. And the question on who won this trade? I think it's a little bit too early to tell. Like, I'm not entirely sure we can really make that assumption and we can make that speculation right now. Like, that's something that we have to wait on, because I remember saying that the trade between the Timberwolves and the Jazz for Rudy Gobert, I thought that was a really bad trade, and it ended up working out rather well. Now, on the Knicks side, I don't really think they're going to miss Julius Randle all that much. I mean, Julius Randle, yes, he did bring some good to the Knicks, but he also brought his bad, primarily in the postseason, where he wasn't really as good of a postseason performer as he was a regular season performer. And his inconsistencies were the downfall of the Knicks, and at least in the series when he was playing. And I don't really know whether or not he will be a solid fit for the Timberwolves, but he does still provide the spacing, he does still provide the scoring that the Timberwolves really need, while at the same time not being as much of a defensive liability, and also being able to actually keep up with a lot of the power forwards that there are in this league, because that was a very big concern putting Karl-Anthony Towns at the power forward paired up with Rudy Gobert. Yes, they would have the height, but Karl-Anthony Towns wouldn't really have the footwork and the speed to be able to guard the typical power forwards. And Pau Gasol's in the chat again. Pau Gasol's in the chat. Salute, bro. How's it going? And back to the conversation at hand, though. Is this a win for the Knicks, or is this a win for the Timberwolves? Now, I'm not entirely sure, because a lot of people, well, at the start, a lot of people were really not expecting this trade to come in for the Wolves. And so a lot of people didn't really like this trade coming in from the Wolves, because why would you trade away a key player to a team that ended up making the Western Conference Finals? Like, you just fell up a little bit short. There's no need to really trade him. However, there is a stat that I do want to bring up that might sway a lot of your opinions. So the Timberwolves, per 100 possessions, were 12.7 points worse when Karl-Anthony Towns was on the court this postseason. So really, like, he was a detriment to this team in the postseason, similar to how Julius Randle tends to be a detriment to the team in the postseason as well. And it's like you're sort of trading away a bad playoff player with a bad playoff player along with several other pieces. So it's hard to say right now whether or not that's going to affect either team and how it's going to affect the team, but I think it's just too early to tell. I definitely feel like this is one of those trades that we have to feel out, because these two players are very inconsistent. Both Julius Randle and Karl-Anthony Towns, they're both very, very inconsistent, especially in the postseason. And it's like you're sort of trading inconsistency with more inconsistency. And whether or not you're going to get that production in the playoffs is yet to be seen. So I'm not really I wouldn't say that this was a bad trade. I think this is a solid trade that could end up benefiting both teams. But who ends up winning the trade? That's a completely different question that I have to wait until the season starts and until the postseason concludes and I see enough what I have to see. Because during the postseason, Karl-Anthony Towns definitely isn't that competent of a postseason performer. There was this one instance where in his first postseason, he scored only 5 points in a playoff game. I don't really hold it that much to him because it was his first ever playoff series. But, I mean, he doesn't really win. And I'm like, his team would win, but it's not like he was a very key or important piece to the team. In fact, it's lucky whether or not he would actually make the team better. Like, you know, there's chances that he would actually make the team worse at times. And the same thing applies with Julius Randle. Now, yes, the Knicks were still a winning team with Julius Randle, but they were also a winning team without Julius Randle. And they won just fine. Really, it was just the injuries to the main core of the team that affected them in the postseason, and it let them down when it mattered most. So we have to see how this season plays out, and we have to see how it's going to affect each of these teams in the postseason. Now, according to looking at this article, Austin Rivers, he was talking on a couple podcasts as well. Austin Rivers ended up explaining that Karl-Anthony Towns' quick decision-making and shooting ability can lead to smoother offensive plays for New York. And he pointed out that Randle tends to dribble a little bit too much, which can disrupt the flow of the game, which is something that is very noticeable in his game. And, yes, Karl-Anthony Towns can create a shot himself, but he is considered one of the best big man three-point shooters for a reason. Arguably the best center at three-point shooting in the history of the NBA. I mean, he does shoot around 40% from three, and as a center, that's very valuable and very impressive because, you can space out the floor rather well. And Rivers also said that Karl is highly skilled, doesn't need the ball in his hands a lot. He's going to shoot or he's going to make a move right away. And he could bring sort of a lot of fluidity to this Knicks offense that we don't really see, especially when you have somebody like Randle who tries to dribble a little bit too much in isolation, as well as Jalen Brunson, who also likes to dribble a lot in isolation. Difference is Jalen Brunson takes highly efficient shots and makes those efficient shots compared to Randle. Now, for the Timberwolves, on the Timberwolves side, acquiring Julius Randle and sort of fitting that in with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards, not entirely sure if they're going to make it as far as they would with the previous team that they had. Maybe they will, but like they do have to get chemistry down. Chemistry is going to be a very key difference I feel like in this postseason, because yes, while the Knicks do have the matchups that they need for Boston, Boston has the team chemistry. They've already won the championship, and a majority of the team and a majority of the players on the team have already had experience playing with each other. And before I end off with this segment, Anthony Manzano in the chat is asking a question. Am I screwed? This is what he's saying. Am I screwed as a Miami Heat fan this season? Do I even make the playoffs? And yes, the Heat, every single year, they always have a chance of making the playoffs. They always go on they'll make the play-in tournament, that's for sure, because the Eastern Conference is incredibly top-heavy. Looking at, I'll just go ahead and explain that right here. So, looking at the Eastern Conference and their standings from last year, I'm going to pull that up right now. Obviously, I don't remember every single team's record from last season because, that was a while ago and I'm focusing on this season. So, looking at the team standings for the Eastern Conference last year, the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, the Bucks, and the Cavs, they all made the postseason. Those are the guaranteed teams that are going to make the postseason this year, along with the Pacers, who I feel are a great team, and the 76ers, which would respectively hold the 5 or the 6 seed, depending on how the season goes, this, that, and the other. That would mean that there is the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th seed still available. And since those seeds are still available, it means that you have a chance to make the playoffs by winning in the play-in. And the difference, like the overall win percentage difference from all of these Eastern Conference teams was almost 10. The Miami Heat had a better, like the 10th seed, the Atlanta Hawks, they were worse than the Miami Heat by 10 games. And the Chicago Bulls were worse than the Miami Heat by, quick math. I'm terrible at math, oh my lord. They were better than them by around, I'd say, 5 games. And actually, no, it's not 5. It's actually 7 games. Like, my math is awful today. But the difference, like, in wins, it's staggering when you go from 8th down to 9th. And realistically, there aren't going to be that many teams that are actually going to be competing for a postseason spot in the Eastern Conference. I mean, the Nets are rebuilding. The Raptors, I mean, they could, but like that would take a miracle in my opinion. Charlotte Hornets, again, could take a miracle. Wizards, Detroit, they're going to be down at the bottom again. And then you're left with the Hawks, which I'm not really entirely sold on the Hawks yet. And then the Bulls, who just traded away DeMar DeRozan and are still trying to figure out their issues with Zach LaVine. So far, the complete team, there's really no other complete team that could match up against the Miami Heat or any other team that would end up falling into the play-in. So I don't really think that, as a Miami Heat fan, you're screwed. You can definitely still make the postseason. But we spent a little bit too much time on this one segment. So now we'll go ahead and go into the next segment, and I'll acknowledge your comments as well, but I do want to go ahead and go into this short break first. I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the